got to try to sit through it for the boy, and now I got to sit through it again since he's in high school.
You got when as he moves school.
Yeah, you change from middle school to high school. You have to do the whole face-to-face all over again. Of course, I was one of those people that kid was smelling salt, kicking back out on the field.
No, so was I. I mean, my dad was with me. I'm not with my son.
How many fingers am I holding up? 2, close enough.
That was my dad. Walk it off. Walk it off. You'll be fine.
Get your eyes checked after the game. I had a coach that used to love have fumble drills where you put you 3 in a row on the ground, a 4-point position, and bounce the football off one of your helmets. Or Bull in the Ring, or what LSU's.
Yeah, we did. We still did. They still do Bull in the Ring. They still do that. My son loved that drill.
Spin and hit him. How old is he now?
11. Yeah, these next 3 years I'm not looking forward to.
Now they're your wife's problem. Whether they live through it is, entirely up to her.
I wish I could say that, but no. I try to stay pretty involved.
I sit up periphery until the discipline time comes. When your father gets home.
You know what's really funny though? I mean, they definitely listen to me. My wife is the hammer.
Yeah.
She's the hammer.
2 minutes.
Not by that clock.
Yeah, it's 2 minutes by that one too, sweetie.
Get your eyes checked.
No, because it's on, sorry, it's a minute and a half now.
Is there anything that's interesting?
Well, it's advertised for 7, so I don't.
What if the viewers at home log in at 7 and miss that?
Exactly.
Rewind,
Really?
we're already live.
I gotcha.
What if you could DVR it so you can skip through the boring stuff? Which would essentially be from the point in time that we initiate the meeting to adjourn.
Actually, that'd be neat to do for a highlight reel of sorts.
Yeah. I'm not going down that road.
So this is the ice rink meeting.
Yep.
Cool.
We don't need Marcia for the appointment, really.
7.
All right. Call the September 9 meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
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 Citizens time. Is there anybody who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Yeah, right. Seeing none, we will close citizens time. Appointments. We need to do an appointment to the ARB. Do I hear a nomination?
Ralph.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. ARB update? I'll take that as none.
Let's go with none right now, yes.
Council update.
Just don't meet the first Monday of every month, Bob.
Okay, Marchand has provided 2 reports, one on zoning permits that were applied for, one for zoning permits that were previously approved, along with infractions. Does anybody have any questions or issues?
No.
No.
Old business. Actually, if there's no objection, we do have somebody here, so if we don't mind, no objection, we move the agenda and take care of them so they can get out of here.
Can I go ahead and ask that we table 7B until our next meeting?
7.
Bylaws?
Thank you. Any objection? See none. Go ahead. Move 7A, Planning Commission bylaws, to the October
7B.
meeting. 7B, excuse me. Marshall, I'd like to take up 7A out of order.
Okay. I have an outline for your discussion. You use a cheat sheet. I gave you a copy of this for your review. As most of you probably were here at the time that the first site plan was approved for the ice rink expansion. And this proposes to add a second sheet of ice to the back of the building. So currently this is Piedmont Tire and Auto. This is the existing rink parking in the front. This is the slope of the hill where you walk down to get into the site. This is the paved road. It takes you back to Durham's property. This is the road separating Costello Way from the Foster's building and Piedmont Tire and Auto. So this would be the second rink of ice. Right now there's locker rooms and other facilities on between the two buildings that would be connected to. Also, if you remember or familiar out there, there's an overhang right now. They're proposing to actually close that and then provide an overhang over the parking that's out there today. So it would actually expand the building over the existing parking lots. So with this plan, there's two issues, or actually three issues we would need the Commission's feedback on. First, with regards to landscaping. The last time this application was reviewed, there was a modified landscaping plan that was provided adjacent to the Winterham property, which is from here to here. The mansion's more or less in this location. And then also this was the R1 property, which is St. Paul's, the St. Paul's Church, rectory and other properties. There's only a 10-foot buffer required adjacent to the commercial Winterham property. There's a 35-foot required to the St. Paul's property. What was negotiated as part of the first rink plan was a reduced buffer from 35 feet to 25 feet. And there was an enhanced, as you can see here, landscaping plan, and there's some arrangement of evergreens and some other plantings to provide an opaque screen closer to the shared boundary with it. So they're asking to roll that screen forward to this plan with the expansion. Does that make sense?
So there's no change from the previously approved.
Correct. Specific to this.
So it's status quo
Status quo.
on an approved site plan. So why are we even addressing it?
Well, the approval of this plan specifically said any expansion of the building
Okay.
will have to readdress landscaping standards. So the curb separating the driveway from the parking lot also has landscaping. These two islands are in place. What's being lost overall are these two parking islands here. The next waiver, they're asking for a second waiver, and that is for what is otherwise required along here, which is a 5-foot landscape strip with the equivalents of 7 trees and 21 shrubs. They are asking to basically take that equivalent amount of space and move it to this area here. This is where the old railroad spur used to come in. That has been filled in since then, and right now it's just kind of open ground, not really seeded, so they're proposing to reseed it and also provide landscaping there. One alternative you may want to consider, what is left here, if that 5-foot landscape strip is not provided, is between 1 and 3 feet, varying distance between here to here. It is I-1 to I-1, so basically there's no buffer. It's more of the landscape strip for parking lot landscaping. Usually when you have a buffer between uses, you see a fence or some other type of opaque screen. So if the Commission was interested in seeing some sort of more distinction between the two uses, in addition to this, you can look at some sort of fencing or some other type of screen. So from a landscaping perspective, I outlined for you here the two parts. It's a reduced use-to-use buffer or district-to-district buffer, and then it's the alternative landscaping buffer. Both times we've required public hearings for these requests. So upon your recommendation to the council, you would also probably consider scheduling a joint public hearing with the council to review those two requests.
Bob, to your point, if we've already approved it,
I'm not worried about the landscaping reduction.
No, it's just pro forma. Since
Okay.
it was a part of site plan, it rolls forward to this one.
But there was a specific provision that it had to, if anything during the site, you'd have to come back in to make sure that was still the appropriate screen. With that too, there's an office trailer that's out here today. That was supposed to be removed as part of this expansion. However, when the bay out here was not enclosed, that's where the public restrooms were supposed to go. So the trailer stayed out there. With this plan, that trailer would go away, be replaced with parking. This area is where the chiller is. You go out there today, it's screened by plywood. As part of this plan, there'd be a more appropriate screen to screen those facilities. There's a chiller out there, there's some propane storage.
Has the screening around the chiller been taken care of yet?
No, but at this point, that they're going to have to expand some of that area. They wound up having to put a chiller here, and they wound up having to put storage for their Zamboni for the propane. So as part of this plan, that screen would be expanded and closed.
And is the intent of the screen also provide noise abatement?
Correct. We have had one or two complaints about the noise.
Yeah.
We're hoping once this matures, that'll provide some baffling, but it's the intent with this plan is to make sure we get the right screening in there. The dumpster that was kind of back in the corner is going to be relocated to this location. In terms of pickup and drop-off, our ordinance requires a pickup and drop-off. They've tentatively scheduled this area where people can kind of sit and wait while cars move in and out and get picked up. So the next issue for the Commission's consideration is parking. We generally blanket all our commercial districts with a 1 per 200 square feet. With this plan, as it stands, or the facility as it stands today is overparked. With the second rink, that will significantly reduce the amount of parking that's there. This site and the Piedmont Tire and Auto site are actually all in one parcel. So the parking can be addressed across the whole site. So our standard parked at the 1 per 200 standard is 245 spaces. And I have that again in your notes here. What they're proposing to do, we can go into more detail about how they came about this number, is provide 170 spaces. That would be 135 spaces here, and then they would use 35 spaces of the Piedmont Tire and Auto. Piedmont Tire and Auto is only required to have, I think, 40 spaces. They have 80, or 45 spaces. They have 80.
But do they use that to park those vehicles that are having maintenance performed on them?
They do. They do use some of that today, but the way the ordinance reads is you can, overall, the site, they're overparked.
Because it's one parcel.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 135 from here, 35 from here, that gives them a total of 170 spaces. That's a difference of 45 between what our ordinance requires and what they require. Now, they base this on
75.
some data that they looked at for ice rinks in and around the area. What Holly noted during her review, and I'll trump you a little bit if I mess up on it, is that the studies, there was some discussion about league play not being a part of that. And so Holly's recommendation was if the commission was going to look at an alternative, that perhaps a higher standard of 226 would be appropriate, which would be a delta of 19 spaces. Eric Spencer, who's with Christopher Consultants, is here to answer questions about that study, and also Daisy Wood, who owns the property. So for the commission, we'll get back to the same. So the next issue is bus parking. As part of the initial, if you remember, this was a temporary use that was done because the Prince William Iceplex had collapsed due to snow. And during the time that this was entered into this parking plan, which there was discussion about buses coming in and out, league buses coming in and out. And while we do not have a specific requirement in our ordinance, how I did look at the Prince William County ordinances and was looking at the ability to provide some sort of bus parking in and around the area for potential need. And was it a total of 3 spaces that you were recommending?
What they had was 3 spaces. That's what they have out there right now. Then when I was going through Prince William County there's not a lot of information on the ice rinks, but for swimming pools or for the like fitness type studios, they would require for this size a minimum of 1 space in Prince William County, at least 1.
Was the recommendation at least 1?
The Prince William County requirement would be at least 1.
Although, again, we've typically deferred to Prince William County, but our ordinance, we do not have any requirement for those spaces. I think generally it's been recognized that we need to revisit our parking ordinance. I think part of a couple of challenges we don't have on-street parking. We don't have municipal parking. And so we're left having to address off-site parking. There was a parking study that was done several years ago. There's some discussion about all the data in there, but generally it says we're overparked in some categories and overparked in others. So this, along with the sportsplex uses we're getting, the Rose building with the gymnastics studios going in, John Lombardozzi, the sportsplex that he owns, he's wanting to expand other uses in other parts of his building. He's similarly going to have a parking challenge. So the commission wanted to take the alternative parking into advisement. You could initiate a zoning text amendment to have the council look at the parking requirements. It would probably be as a whole, not this. In this case, it would be specifically for an ice rink or sportsplex use, but there may be an opportunity to go ahead and look at the parking ordinance as a whole. So, what we're looking at in terms of next steps, and I'll be happy to answer any questions I put on here, is the commission has 60 days with which to review and make a recommendation unless the applicant agrees to an extension. Again, with the parking as it is, the only option you have as a commission is to recommend denial because of the parking standard. You could look at initiate the parking text amendment with working with the applicant, and they could, upon their agreement, could defer their 60-day requirement while we look at the ordinance. So once you make your recommendation, then you again would have a joint hearing for the landscape. So again, Eric's here to answer any questions. So is Daisy. Hopefully that made sense. Happy to answer any questions. Holly can give us some additional background. Eric, is there anything you want to say? Or?
I think you covered
Okay.
it all.
Just realistically, in terms of busing, when they're talking about leagues, particularly for like swimming pools, that's a scholastic league that can be coming in or something like that. The ice rink's not really used for that in that sense, is it? Do you have, is this like visiting soccer where you might have a bus come in, or realistically, what's the chance of a bus coming in?
We did have one bus that came in last season. There is a high school. There are some high school teams that play, but high school ice hockey is not a recognized sport. So schools typically don't have recognized high school team. It's like a separate club.
Right. Like an archery club or something.
Correct, just like that. So last season we did have one bus that came in and dropped people off. The reason, when we originally built the rink, the reason we said we needed buses because there was a junior team. There are actually two junior teams that played out of there, and teams were traveling from like New York and Maine and all that, and they did travel in buses, and that was the reason we needed bus parking to begin with. But now, I mean, like I said, we had one come last. Actually, I think in the last 2 years we had one bus come on one kid.
I'm sorry, this is Ron Evans. He runs the conference.
In that instance, do you remember what the bus did? Just out of curiosity, where did it park? Do you remember what it actually did based on the land where it is now?
As Marchand said, we're over parked. The bus came to the front of the building, dropped the kids off. They got their equipment out, and the bus went and parked. I mean, we had parking space here, and he just took up a bunch of parking space.
Or you went to Sheets and got a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Balloon
He
parking
also,
lot.
My experience with bus drivers is they generally do that and come back before it's over.
Mr. Chairman, there's also the shared easement that they have. That's the driveway that goes back.
Back in
It's somewhat wide.
in their own property.
Yeah.
You probably have to go into the details of.
Yeah, but you're going to lose that with this landscaping strip to some degree.
So
And technically, you can't consider that, but
technically, but if he's out there for a couple hours and and it's wide enough that truck traffic can get past it, that's one opportunity.
yeah.
Ms. Barrett?
Marchant, you mentioned a couple of things from the first rink that still haven't been completed. Do we have a laundry list of those items and an ETA on when those are going to be completed?
And when we originally approved the plan, there wasn't a phasing plan.
Yes.
So it was. I think there was kind of a differing. The expectation was that they're going to build it all at once, and they weren't able to do that. And they've gone back and revised their plans. So it's put. That's why you still see the office trailer out there. You still see the minimal, or just the plywood screening around the chiller. But that was all in kind of the discussions while they wanted to bring in the second rink. So what's outstanding is the office trailer and the screening of the chiller.
Now have
All other site requirements, lighting, landscaping, everything else has been.
the facade and all the other stuff they were supposed to do on the front, that's been completed?
No, the front enclosure has not been completed.
And that was part of the initial also, correct?
Correct, but that wasn't a requirement of the ordinance.
Uh-huh.
So all the other requirements of the ordinance they've met. So does that make sense? In other words, it wasn't a requirement that they build out to that.
Yes.
The focus was, are you meeting your public health, safety, well screening, all that stuff.
All right. I noticed in here there's a waiver request for the 5-foot buffer. I'm not particularly having a particular issue with it, particularly given that it looks like it's going to be mitigated by additional plantings elsewhere. So we're going to transfer that. I'm not really concerned about the buffer between the I-1 and the I-1. It seems like the alternate location is going to provide some additional opaque screening between the B1, the R1, and the I-1 in this particular instance. That being said, the only reason I'm a little bit hesitant is because of the adjoining property where that buffer is being taken out of and the non-conformance of that property. And I'm a little concerned that we're going to set some sort of unintended, perceived precedent. So I kind of want to work that through with you in the next week or two as to how we're going to ameliorate that particular circumstance should it arrive between this property and the other property. I kind of want to get everybody on the same page, but in theory, I don't particularly have a problem with it. With regard to the parking standard, personally, I'm not real partial to taking on the current parking standards and addressing parking in sort of a piecemeal fashion. I don't want to start setting up separate parking standards without doing a full revision of the entire parking standard. What I would suggest, and again, this is largely because of concerns about precedent and establishing a precedent. If we're going to do a waiver, if a waiver is going to be requested of the current parking standard, I would suggest that in addition to the material that's been provided on the, I believe it was the Reston Ice Rink?
The Ashburn Ice Rink?
The Ashburn Ice Rink. If we're going to suggest that a waiver be granted from the current parking standard instead of doing a text amendment of the parking standard, which I'm not really comfortable doing right now, I'd like to make it pretty bulletproof and related strictly to ice rinks. And in order to do that, I think we're going to require some analysis of more than a singular facility in another location. Another 1, 2 would be great, so that we've got a total of 3, and we've got some basis, some consistent basis to determine an average or get a sense of what other jurisdictions are doing.
Was there a table in there for that?
Yeah, it was all related to the Ashburn Ice Rink. So if we had, the Ashburn Ice Rink, the Fairfax, whatever, if we could get some sort of comparative data where we could determine whether or not the request is reasonable given what the actual usage is in other jurisdictions and what's actually permitted in other jurisdictions, I could probably support a waiver request at least specific strictly to ice rinks. I don't want to go across the board to all sports facilities because they have a different, they generate different usage numbers and that. And just, again, portends problems that I'm not particularly fond of dealing with. But that would be my suggestion on those two fronts. Other than that,
Any comments on bus parking?
to be honest with you, I know it's a bit of an overkill thing, but given that there's a possibility of one showing up, if you leave the requirement at 1, I'll be happy. I think you've got to take into account the possibility of at least one showing up. Maybe one a year, and the remainder of the time it just gets converted to regular parking. Perhaps just classified as swing space. Or
Do you really think just one? I mean, because if they do have two
I'm assuming-
high school teams that come in, would be two separate buses. I mean, the competitive teams don't usually share a bus. So, my thought would be a minimum of 2 bus spots.
I'm just
for
thinking realistically,
competitive.
given what the hockey scene is,
That would?
I'm just taking a realistic look at what my perception of the hockey leagues are. I just don't see.
Maybe a dual-use space.
Yeah.
I think
Oh, okay.
you got to imagine if the bus has kids in it, you're not going to have the
You're
equivalent
not going to
amount
have the
of cars.
equivalent number of
Yeah.
cars. You're going to reduce the number of cars by half.
Okay.
So there's
Yeah, I think we could write that
Yeah.
in. It's just,
Eric had a, Eric, did you?
Well, I was going to say two things. Going back to your thing about if you look at page 14 of the ice rink parking study, where the 85 parking spaces that we came from was what the Ashburn rink did is they looked at 11 different rings in the vicinity around here. So that's where the parking space requirement we used 85. Because that was the average number of parking spaces over if you take all 11 rings, look at the number of sheets, the number of parking provided, do the math, it says that there's an average of 85 parking spaces. So that's where we picked the 85 parking spaces, because we'll meet the average of those 11 ice rinks. So I don't know if you want more information than that, or...
actually, now that I see table 4.
Yeah. This is what I was referring to.
it's on page 27.
31 is what I'm looking at.
27 of the packet, yes.
Yeah, 27.
Yeah.
Mine's number
Oh, there's one on.
Yeah, I'm 31.
Are you looking at
Yeah,
this?
it's the same chart twice.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing about the bus parking is, it's suggesting, like Marchand said, if we could use it as a dual purpose and count it for both, we could do that. But if you're trying to get us to you're going to lose 6. Right now, you can see we're right at the minimal. If you put a bus parking space in there, you're taking out 5 spaces.
A dedicated bus space, yeah.
Minimum.
So
Minimum.
we're down. The other option would be if we could use that. We have about 30 feet. That travel aisle between the two, that joint easement, there is about 30 feet there. That's on both properties. So you can almost leave yourself like a 20-foot travel way, maybe a bus parking on that travel way, if you really want something there. I don't know if that would be an acceptable.
That's not a public road, is it?
No, but I think maybe it's worth having them go back and look at the easement language again. I think
That would make
we
me
had
much more
talked.
comfortable.
We had talked with Ms. Wood at one point of doing some additional spaces on.
The east edge.
Yeah, doing some additional spaces up in here.
Yeah.
So maybe that's, because there's quite a width here.
Yeah.
So maybe there is, we just always caution because it was a shared easement, you didn't want to upset the person that's entitled to the easement.
Can we get a copy of the easement language for the next meeting? We'll address it at that point in time.
So that would be one of the point about the bus parking is this, we can't just go out there and say, okay, let's put bus parking here, because again, we'll lose spaces, if you look at the site plan, we've taken up all the land available that we could to try to get the second ice rink, because again, when we started this, we brought this up at the very beginning, because we pulled up the 245 spaces, when we met with Ron, and Ron was saying that he doesn't, they don't even use a quarter of that parking space now, and it's really, the busiest day is Saturday, and so it's not like it would be a use that you'd be getting with other, businesses at the same time.
Like I said, once we analyze the data here, I think, I apologize, I just got it today, I haven't had a chance to look at it and break it down. I personally, I don't have any real issue with suggesting a waiver be granted based on historic numbers at other rinks. I think, again, I wish we could change the parking standard, but I don't think we're in a position right now where we really want to do that. And I just, from a technical standpoint and getting you guys to a point where you're comfortable and getting to a point where the town's comfortable, I think approaching it through a waiver, at least at this point in time, and the parking standard may or may not change in the future, in which case the waiver will become moot. I think that's probably the better way to handle it.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, in their defense, when we first looked at it, we said, try to keep any parking off that easement.
Yeah.
So we did encourage them to do that, so we don't want to punish them for doing that. But with the bus parking, maybe some additional
Go
spaces.
back and look at
there's
the
some
easement language and
opportunities.
see what's there.
Just want to eliminate any challenges by the adjacent landowner to that easement.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have any delivery trucks that come out there, that come down there?
Like a UPS truck might deliver,
But, and do you have like anything in terms of for the accessories, like if you're gonna have a snack area or anything like that, because that was part of it, it's called a loading space, not just a bus space, but a loading space, and so that's why I'm wondering, in terms of deliveries and for, when you have the two together, if you're gonna have a larger concession area, I could expect some
We
deliveries.
don't have any concession area right now.
Okay, are you proposing a concession area? Okay, because that's the thing about too, is we're talking about a loading / bus space, is to have some place for a truck that can be delivered.
The one thing about that, we also, they're probably not going to be delivering during the prime time where you're going to get that, both, they'll be doing it during the week when it's probably not even being used at all much. And so again, you're looking at high times for Saturday, right, Ron? That's what
I don't know if you know, Monday through Thursday, we don't open till like 3:30. Today we didn't open till 3:30, so.
That would be something though, if you're gonna go through a waiver process and that might be a discussion you wanna have though. Because like I said, I don't support eliminating the spaces, and that would be something to discuss is delivery trucks. If you're saying we still want to eliminate those, to have that discussion that they wouldn't sign anything.
Anybody have any further questions? And we'll defer the further action until the October meeting. Okay.
Chairman, might get direction, just make sure I'm clear on the direction. You want a copy of the easement?
Want a copy of the
Language.
easement?
You want to look at, I guess offline, talk about alternative streams to Mr. Durham's
Impact of the
property?
alternative stream to the Durham property.
Okay, and did you want any additional information on comparable rates, or is what you have?
No, what's here is acceptable. I'm sorry, I missed that table. I was just looking at the Ashburn thing.
And we'd ask that too, if you're going to propose an alternative, please provide documentation that suggests why that's it, so.
No, that'll probably be sufficient on that particular aspect, and we'll review the bus issue offline as well. Bus parking / loading.
Okay.
Okay.
And yeah, I just do want to call your attention, when I had come up with the 113 per rink, it's also based off this study, and that's the 85th percentile in this study.
And how many are proposed in this one?
I'm sorry?
How many are proposed in this particular rendition?
It's 85 per rink, so,
170. And how many are actually on this?
It's under
Between the two
135 at the rink.
Okay.
I put that on your cheat sheet, I gave you the breakdown.
All right.
Still on the table.
All right. Bounce back up to item 6A, Historic District Overlay. Okay, nothing to sign.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, thanks, that's okay. Thanks, Howard. Sorry, come on. Okay, I'm sorry, we're back to Historic District. Two handouts for you. The first is the maps. One behind is the one previously.
Start selling flashlight, I'm going to get really.
Backtrack. So the first one is the one that was previously. There's two. There's one that the commission underneath in the blue line that was first looked at. Commission looked at it again.
This is the one you and I can follow.
Yeah, and I'll explain kind of the evolution of that one. And then what I have is the draft ordinance. Let's go through some of the highlights and then we can. I have this electronically.
My house is in a historic district?
Nope.
Okay. I was kidding.
Well,
So-
technically, right now, yes, it is.
Yes, right now, the entirety is in the town. So, looking at the blue map, remember that the idea was to shrink it back to the core, and then there were some discussions about corridor overlay districts. We went back and looked at the state code, and it does allow you to include your corridors into your downtown district. And so the map on top was the kind of the compromise where we brought back in the north and south corridors along Old Carolina. And then extended west to the interchange included those properties that front Washington Street, the Lee-Berry Shopping Center, Piedmont Tire and Auto, Sheetz, CVS, Fauquier Bank, and then a portion of the old Fairgrounds property, basically, again, to look at that corridor. So this is the previous one that we had brought up to the council. So the council's direction was to go back, look at the district boundary, which we have, and also come back with suggested edits to the ordinance, which I have, which I just passed out to you. So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I can go through what we did.
Yeah.
So the first major one is in terms of creation and boundaries. It used to reference basically the entirety of the town. And if you remember, Chairman Weir had introduced some language about providing some specificity about how these districts are created, what the content should be. And so this was the language you had previously sent up to council for their review. So
The language in red, correct?
correct, language in red. So basically, you would create or describe in detail once the boundary is created what that is and where the blue text is. And it basically says it's an overlay district. A talks about that it should be shown and what it should contain. And then B talks about how these regulations in the district map will be changed, which is either by a TC resolution, by a motion of the Planning Commission, petition of the property owner, basically what you have today for a rezone. In terms of Section 58.554, it was just for consistency's sake. Some places in the ordinance we reference buildings and structures. Other places we just reference structures. Other places we just reference buildings. We actually define in the ordinance buildings separate from structures. So again, for consistency's sake, just had that in there. In Section C, under there where it says the term altered, I need to fill in that section, but I've included a section farther down that says specific activities that are exempt from ARB review, so that would be filled in there. Did add in Section 58, I didn't give it a number yet, but basically a pre-application review. If people want to come in and talk to the ARB about their ideas, this gives a mechanism for which to do that. Section 58.555, we had a checklist that we use, but we didn't provide much specificity in what these materials or what these applications should entail by ordinance. So what this does is creates a checklist, more or less, for the clerk to look at when people come in and submit their application. So A1 is basically some simple, hey, you need to have an application, you need to describe what you're doing. For the larger projects, B goes into larger building plans for new buildings, landscaping plans, and basically some other information for larger projects. So A would be a sign, a shed, something like that. B would be your larger subdivisions, your new construction and the like. And then to provide some procedural, I have community development in there. So, okay. And something I did add on the next page, item B, requests for certificates of appropriateness shall be accepted only from the record owner. We do have issues sometimes where the applicant will simply turn in the application. This just makes it clear that the record owner has to be signed on to the application. I know I'm going over these fast, but this is just kind of a general overview of what's going on. So Section 58.556, I've highlighted the relevant tasks. So looking at the state, remember I told you there was a state model ordinance that was sent to me? They basically say the same thing, except for they don't talk about a specific residency requirement. Now, we do have an architect on the board right now that's not a town citizen. So I guess the question would be, did the commission want to recommend a separation where, okay, of the 7 members, 4 or 5 have to be residents?
The next statement covers it, though, where qualified and acceptable candidates are available.
But do we want to create the distinction there?
No, I think it already does.
I think it already does.
When I read that, it says if qualified and acceptable candidates as a resident is qualified, you can have it. So anyway, we don't have to solve it right now. We're just kind of flagging that as, do we want to separate, okay, so many have to be from the town, so many have to be outside, or something like if a qualified, acceptable candidate, a resident that's a qualified,
Or do we just toss it and leave it as it is? It's called prelim.
I don't know, somewhere in the we're qualified, in that sentence, I think there's some way to come up with some type of
a
verbiage.
qualified or acceptable candidate is not available, a local business owner could, do we try to include business owners?
That particular line?
That could
John
be
Parnham,
entertaining.
well, if we had like an architect that's set up in town. we wanna-
Yeah, but that's more of a professional issue. I mean,
Okay. Well, something to think about, because right now, the way I would interpret this is to say you have to be residents and that's it. So, kind of like with, I think it would probably be appropriate if one of these professionals is not, a town council or a resident is a member of a business, or do we want to have some business owners in town? I think it's an equity issue where you have the residents that are looking at it, but also the business owners that, that are impacted by some of the decisions that are made, so.
the question is, are you going to get a business owner to do it?
Right.
Yes.
In right now, it's neutral. I mean, it can be a business owner, they're not precluded from being on this.
Resident, and
Well,
you
no,
change
shall
the
be a
language.
legal resident, but we would have to, if the guidelines for one of the residents is to be a legal resident of
You
the
change
town,
the
then
property owner.
maybe, a renter can
Yeah,
technically
that's
be a
right.
legal resident. However, if we're extending it to business owners, I think it needs to somehow business owners that own real property.
Well, and business owner, they can own a business in DC.
Yeah, well,
So, I mean,
obviously, a
how-
business
how-
owner in town, I think we'd go that far, but I think it actually has to be someone that owns real property in town.
It's going to be real torture.
Someone that has a real vested interest, so.
I guess the issue with John Parham is we didn't have a town resident that was an architect,
Right.
so we went outside. The way I read it right now, technically, we're not supposed to have one there. So is it worth maybe more specificity in the ordinance saying you can pull those professionals from outside the town if they're not a resident?
If there's no
Or
pool
not.
of qualified talent available, or something like that.
But I don't know that we would necessarily specify that somebody's going to be a business owner.
More broadly would be the
Oh,
qualified
no, I'm
candidates outside
talking
the
about
town.
him, when he had asked about expanding it, because if we're going to go to a non-resident that sets up in here, again, I, think someone with more of a vested,
Yeah.
So again, maybe make it simple to saying where a qualified, acceptable candidate's not available within the town, one of these professionals can be
From outside.
from outside the town. Is that an easy way to do it? Sorry, long discussion. Powers and duties, this simply just expanded more of, right now, the architecture just more or less reviews.
Ooh, I like E.
Yeah, so it's more of bringing them kind of more into the involvement with other functions, more or less just the certificates of appropriate.
Evil.
You are, Bob.
don't we already have this outlined in the code somewhere on what the ARBs, or is
have-
it just in their guidelines?
I have to go back and double check the guidelines.
It may be in their guidelines, but
Yeah,
it's
maybe in the
not,
guidelines,
it's not incorporated in the code anywhere.
No, other than we just say what they have to what they have to evaluate.
Although we have to be careful that this comports with the state enabling statute too, but,
Yeah, well, we'll do that as well to make sure. That's once we get farther down the line and come up with a final draft, and we'll have the legal review. Okay, under procedures for meetings. This goes, I'm sorry.
Advised is actually, okay, so advised is a good word. However, frequently the advice is frequently presented as a demand. I don't know.
where are you at?
On C, 58, powers and duties, C.
I've run into this so many times where an ARC and ARB will advise a homeowner that is actually a demand. I have a real serious problem with that. I don't know how we word it so that it is just an advice.
But see, that gets tied into 58,
Yeah.
beyond the pre-application review. So if you made it more specific with regard to the pre-application review, I think it'd be okay. But if you're just going to leave it open-ended, I can see Ralph's point.
I guess the way I was looking at it
I mean,
was,
yeah, the way I read C, it means technically they can start doing inspections of the town and almost citing people and bringing them in and
Sure,
giving their
yeah.
advice.
Okay.
So,
The way I looked at it was, if someone buys one of these properties in town and they want some advice on how to redevelop it,
Right.
they would come in and get some recommendations on how to do it.
And that's fine.
I think that's more,
that, yeah.
I think it's more a role of something like a historic commission as opposed to the ARB.
I would change it to provide information to owners of historic buildings rather than advise.
Yeah, that advice,
Yeah.
or to get a little.
Provide as a
Yeah.
resource,
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Yeah.
Right, information.
And F, that's really the job of the historic commission. I don't know if that's really an ARB's.
Yeah.
That, yeah, you're
I
talking
can never
about
get a clear
encumbering-
answer if our commission's defunct or not. So.
Well,
It can be, the historical commission can be reinstituted.
but F sort of brings with it all sorts of
And the new
encumbering
museum
and
director may
expensive
actually want
things.
to consider doing that.
How about E? Was E objectionable? I know you made a comment
No, I
about
love E, but I would strike F.
Okay. This is not
Really?
meant,
Uh-huh.
it's not meant to be a punishing tool.
Oh,
I'm sorry, did I say that? Sorry. Review and
Marchant
propose.
said that.
and every other month, new boundaries could be presented to council for consideration also.
Yeah, this is,
Yeah.
Okay, D. Do you want to strike D?
Actually,
we
upon
go to-
reflection, I would probably strike E and F.
E and F. Okay. What about D?
And D's fine.
Oh, let's just strike them all.
D, I have no real issue with. I think you're right, probably E is a little bit of an overkill.
Okay.
And F is just fraught with danger.
Procedure for meetings. Under the first one, A. It's just simply they don't have a clerk.
Don't have a secretary, you have a clerk.
We have a clerk. We don't have a secretary. I'm sorry. Thank you. Under C, for some reason, a lot of the plagiarized ordinances talk about a hearing. They don't have hearings; they have meetings. So, what I borrowed from doing some research is to say that the only time you would have to be given notice. So typically, a lot of the way these ordinances are written, they say every time you have a meeting, you're supposed to have a public hearing and you're supposed to have public notice. But you don't have to do that.
For a meeting of the ARB, you still have to have public notice.
We don't do that now. We just by
Well, it's
publishing the
scheduled
agenda.
it's scheduled on the website. It's,
Yeah, well, it's we publish an agenda,
Yeah,
but we don't call it a hearing, which is advertised in the paper. and
yeah.
Yeah, we call it meeting.
Property owners are done. So basically, this says, just for more specificity about the expectation is that we'll be given notice to the applicants of where the meetings are. I don't know if we want to give other property owners in the area, maybe just say the applicants. But meetings do not need to be advertised in
Do you even
advance.
need that whole clause, and a full and impartial whatever shall be granted?
Okay.
I mean, I'm not, the meeting shall be open to the public, period.
True.
The board shall meet within 30 days after an application for requiring action by the board. So, I think that covers it right there.
Okay. Take the rest out of it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just,
I was just trying to cover, I ran across this, I was like, why does everyone keep saying hearings? So I wanted to add some stuff in there that said, figure it out. Okay. D, would-
hang on a second. Yeah, we'll come, I'll look at C and make some suggestions on that at a later date.
just simply clarifying that it's not expected that it has to be publicly advertised. D was just for consistency, adding application. Now, the next one with 14 days to 60 days, the commission and the council throughout the ordinance, you typically have 60 days. The challenge we have 14 days is that they only meet once a month. So they'd have to have special meetings every month in order to comply with the ordinance, unless the applicant agrees to extend it, was by the last part of the sentence. So I had added 60 days just to be consistent with our other governing board.
Do other jurisdictions extend the same that it is, or because it's usually an aesthetic thing, is that why it had a smaller
A
time
smaller
period?
time window.
To be honest with you, I have no idea where this came from.
Oh,
So, where 14 days came
I'll
from.
look at that too. I think that was in the original enabling statute. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it might be an evolved thing.
check that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know what you. A lot of this I try to go through 2306. So I did want to go to E, because this is an issue that the I didn't make any changes, but the ARB is kind of in the middle of a discussion with over the fence, Snyder fence. So, Ralph is okay if I talk? Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, no.
So we had a situation where the application as proposed was denied, but an alternative was approved. If you read this, and when I first heard that, I said, okay, well, if they want to go back to the original application, they can just refile the ARB application. But if you read it this way, it says, unless they amend it, you can't bring it back for a year.
No,
So
and that's
That's
perfectly fine.
that's perfectly fine? Okay.
I mean, that's, what you do is,
Usually
that's
that's
there
with
for a
rezone.
reason.
Okay.
It's so you don't have nuisance filings every month.
Yeah. Well, we do see rezonings
Or
typically.
venue seeking, in essence, waiting till someone's not there.
Now, is it the whole appeal process and the 7-day cutoff, is that just in the ARB guidelines, or is that in our code somewhere?
That's in our code.
Yes.
It's later on.
Really?
The appeal? Yeah, I made some, I wanted to do some more tweaking on the appeals, but I made some initial ones. Okay, so we can leave that as it is. What else did I want to see? Okay, this one I'm probably going to have to mess with some more, but in the matters to be considered, talks about the general characteristics of what this board's supposed to look at it. Now, what's interesting is, and probably something that needs to be emphasized, is the second line of the first paragraph. Detailed design or features not subject to any public view. Do we want to define what the public view is? Is it from a public street?
Yes,
Is it from a public?
we do need to define it, so we don't have any arguments over it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I can stand on this particular spot,
And I
and
can
if I
see the
peer
roof.
between the two houses and over the fence, I can see the
The
top
peak
of
of the
the,
roof.
the peak of the roof of the shed. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've had that happen.
It's kind of like later on we say but the part of it here is you're not to consider any interior arrangements. Look at the massing, look at the details, and are not subject to any review. So I, for instance, a good example is my house, where you cannot see the fence from any. Anyway, I have trees all around me, but I still had to come before the ARB review.
I had to come back to plant a big bush to cover the overhang, the way my deck overhangs the side of the house. I put a big tree in front of it.
Gotcha. 6A talks about buildings that need to come down. There's two parts to this. This, more or less, a lot of the ordinances that I researched in the state one, that gave me the same way, where they basically take the language out of the state code, talks about how you, if the ARB and the council denies you a demolition permit, you can put it up for sale, and there's a sliding scale to how you do that. We otherwise reference this code section in our appeals section. We say if you want to appeal a decision to demolish, you can go follow the state code requirements. So this seems to be a lot of text, and if the text of the code changes, we'd have to come back and change our code. So it's just something to, if we wanted to spell out specifically the options to an owner if they're denied both by the ARB and the council a demolition permit.
So what if the structure is a public hazard?
We address that later on. I don't know.
Yeah, that comes down in, I believe, 9, 10, or 11.
Okay.
So I did add some additional language. Number 9 is we don't reference our ability to adopt the historic district guidelines, so I added some language on that.
They've never been adopted by the town council, have they?
They have.
They have.
But we didn't have any reference in the ordinance that said they had the ability to do that. So, the last set of guidelines was we approved on 7 September 2010.
That's been that long ago?
So we have some basic text about what it takes to bring down a building or move it. So I plagiarized some language to talk about if you want to move a contributing, well, I need to revise that language. We should say moving of a historic building or structure. I can change that. We don't define contributing resource in our ordinance. So you shall basically approve it if it meets, A through D criteria. Now, I need to go back and double check the design guidelines. I think they have some basic references to, if you're going to demolish a building, you need to do a historic, take a photograph, do a write-up, do some other things. But this provides just some more specificity on the criteria they would need to look at whether or not to bring a building down. 5860B, this is basically saying after a year, your COA is null and void. You have to, within that year, diligently pursue it, or you're going to have to come back. So, the next one, I'm interested in getting your feedback, all of it I'm interested in getting your feedback on, but this is something that would be new, is listing all the exemptions from having to go through the ARB review. So if this new district boundary was adopted, it takes out all the HOAs and everything, this is what would apply. And basically they would come through the zoning administrator, myself, and I would make the determination. If I didn't feel like I could make a determination, then I'd kick it back to the ARB.
Are all of these already exempted from their review process? Or?
Not all of them, no.
Or, to be
Like
quite honest,
number 10, but it should be.
Yeah. Should number 10 be under their review?
No, I'm saying the opposite.
Now, what I do need to do is number 8, substantial alteration. I need to define that, just because it can be a subjective. Same with
If you,
minor.
I would just take it out then. Rather than try and define it,
Okay.
I would just strike it.
What about minor, number 7, minor structural additions which will not substantially change architecture?
Strike it.
Okay.
Well, actually,
No, I don't. think you wanna leave it in
I
there
would just
so
get
they-
rid of the word "or" after structure, comma, which are generally hidden from the, I don't need, that way you tie the two concepts together.
I'm sorry, say again?
They don't stand independently. Minor structural additions and deletions to a building or structure which will not substantially change the architectural character of the building or structure, comma, which are generally hidden from the view of a public right-of-way.
Okay.
Get rid of the word "or."
Okay.
And then just tie the two concepts together so that they've got to meet both tests.
So what I want to do is,
Replace or with and,
now with this, and this, I kind of,
essentially.
Okay, you can do that.
You replace or with and.
And which are generally, okay.
an English major.
I was going to do it with a comma separating, put it on and it works too.
Now, I'm cross-referencing here, and I need to be consistent. This says public right-of-way. I would amend that to say public view, and we'll define what
As
that is.
defined, yeah, so.
Which may be public right-of-way.
Okay. Strike number 8. Okay. So the next one basically says, I'll evaluate it, and if I can't make a determination, I'll either ask for more information or kick it to the ARB. Okay. Right of appeal, the first part basically says we had 45 days if the ARB didn't take action. This puts it up to 90, and I think I borrowed that from somewhere.
It's currently 7.
Yeah.
No.
No,
That's
this
the
is
appeal.
if you
Oh.
if the board doesn't make a decision,
Oh, okay.
they're out there flapping and not making a decision. This would commit them to 45 days. This would kick it up to 45 days.
I don't know, when I kick it up to 90, I'd be happy with 60 in this particular
60?
instance.
Yeah, well, yeah, because back at.
93 months is unreasonable.
Yeah, back at 58.558, it's 60 days. When voting on any question or application, may voice or vote, no secret ballot, the board shall vote and announce its decision on any matter properly before, not later than 60 days after. So I would keep it at if they don't act within 60 days, because they already say they have to act in 60 days. So wouldn't we keep it that way? Why would we give them an additional?
I forgot that we made the.
Oh, okay.
Someone with the required fee, do we have a fee on the appeal for non-action? I don't think we should be charging people to require the board to do something.
I misread that. I was thinking with the denial. I want to be honest with you. I want to go back. I struck out here, member of the town council appealing it. I found some better language about bringing in a third party that can appeal any decision of the.
Leave the town council in there.
So, let me come
Leave
back
the
to you.
town council member in there, otherwise you're going to get a fight.
Okay.
at both
I
boards.
I still have, and I've raised this several times before, is
Duly noted.
that, I'd like to make it for the record again, that it's one thing to have the council member appeal it. It's another thing to then have that council member sit in review of his own appeal, or her own appeal. So I would suggest, if we're going to continue to make that in there, that it says that they would have to file as an applicant and can then not sit in review of their own appeal. So I said, let me leave that
I
in
hardly
there.
disagree. I believe there will be others who disagree at this panel, and I know there will be others who disagree at the town council level. So I would,
I think
it's a matter of efficacy, just
there was,
leave it alone.
I've seen some other, I think there's I think there's a legal problem with it, to have that person sit in review, and I've asked.
Actually, there isn't, because it's part of their elected powers.
Again,
We've gone down this legal argument before, and the opinion has been rendered, and it was cleared and had holy water sprinkled on it in the
Okay.
past, and
again, I still
I'd
think
rather not
it's,
revisit.
perception is the case that it does not,
There's a lot of perception.
there's the red face,
Yeah.
well, there's the red face test.
Well, I'm pretty sure we're going
So-
to have our new legal counsel review this as well.
Well,
So
I guess that's what I'm talking about.
just something to make a note on and get legal opinion on. Because
I found some alternate language.
Another
I think that
conversation
will-
about stop picking and choosing when
Yep.
someone was competent and when someone wasn't.
I think a lot of this came from,
Pre-Alzheimer's days.
I didn't say that. There was an issue before where there was some concern that the council have some ability to limit challenges at the court level of certain ARB cases. And so the idea of the town council being a person that could appeal it was that you could keep it in-house, evaluate all the facts, and then decide whether or not you want to go decision next. I found some, we'll keep council in there, but I found some other language that allows a third party to operate in the same way. Now, again, it would keep them, it would presumably not allow them to then send a review of the appeal, but I'll bring it back to you and look at it. Where you see the green strikeout, it seemed like the order was wrong, that it was saying you would appeal a decision of the town council before you even went to the council to get a decision. So
Are we leaving it at 7 or changing it to 30? Because I think you can write in for your appeal within 7 days. It doesn't say we'll have the appeal in 7 days. It just says you have to notify and write, the clerk within 7 days. Did we cover that?
Where are you at?
I'm back at A. It's the purple writing.
where it says on or before 30 days after the decision of the board.
7.
Okay, we have 7.
I like it at 7.
Why is my language different than yours? Where are you at?
I'm at 5861.
Where are
right
you?
appeal.
Okay. Oh, okay, I'm looking at the
Yeah.
wrong number. All right.
Okay. Just, again, looking at other jurisdictions, most people gave them between meetings to file the appeal.
Well, but the appeal goes to council, not back to the ARB, does it?
Correct. Goes straight to
So-
council, so 30 days, all you're doing is
30
really
days, that
extending it up to
kicks it-
45.
Yeah, that kicks it to,
45.
yeah, because they could put their appeal in after the council meeting. If it's 7 days, then it can actually get to council in a more timely
Does
fashion.
it say you have to file, it doesn't say, what's my train of thought? You can file it in 2 days. This is the law, you have the range.
That's why I like 7.
Yeah, I like 7 too.
Okay, just being consistent.
It's a different,
What
it's
are
a
the other
different.
jurisdictions that do 30?
City of Manassas, Leesburg, Middleburg, I believe one.
Okay,
And
Marshall,
this- and I
pardon.
think the state ordinance I got. I'm sorry, yes, sir.
No, that's all right. Pardon my ignorance. What happens if they don't submit it within 7 days?
No appeal.
Then they lose the right to appeal.
So we
It
want
would
to
have to-
bind them to say.
They would have to wait a year to come back and file it again.
Why?
Because it's mentioned prior, the an adjudicated decision can't be appealed for a year.
I thought there was other verbiage about the year and what where you're referring to from.
Go back to
If an application is
procedures for
denied.
meetings, 58558. E, the board shall not reconsider any decision except by where an applicant appears within 30 days with his application amended.
I think,
Oh, see, mine says 90.
And it says, for 1 year, you can amend your application within 90 days of a denial.
Shall not reconsider. Shall not reconsider. It's the board reconsidering. The board will not reconsider it unless the applicant appears with an amended application. So if you show up, but if you show up with the same application, it's not going to be heard.
Right. And that's the difference.
right.
So that they don't keep showing up meeting after meeting after meeting with the same application, waiting for one of the negative votes to not show up.
Okay. So we're saying if they have 7 days to come back with the same.
If they don't like the
to
decision.
argue this if they don't like the decision.
If there's a final decision made, and I think the other.
But see, I think the 7 days just protects everybody because,
It
if
protects the
I,
applicant.
if I get denied, I need to act quicker to come in. However, if,
I'm looking-
Joe Schmo doesn't like what someone else got approved for, I think holding him to that same 7 day, if he comes in at day 9 because he doesn't like the doghouse his neighbor put up, I think he should be,
I think the greater point is if somebody gets, let's say somebody gets an approval on something, I'm not so much looking at the denial aspect. I'm
Either
looking
way,
at the
yeah.
approvals. If somebody gets an approval and they've got the contractors they've got the contractors online, the work's begun, 15, 20 days down the road, and then on the 30th day, somebody files an appeal.
exactly.
You're stuck between a rock and a hard place because your construction's already begun, your renovation's already begun, and you're going to have some expenditure tied to it. So I'd rather have some sense of, it gives people who are getting their certificate of approval some sense of certainty.
Exactly.
That, once they begin the process past a date certain, that somebody's not going to rein them back in and drag them back in here and potentially change it again.
What about 14 days?
I really like the
They
7
meet on the
days.
third week. They meet on the third Wednesday. I want to leave it. There's got to be I think the only happy medium to accommodate not potentially pushing them back a month is 7 days.
I guess what I'm saying, most folks that aren't savvy to denials and other types of things would probably take them,
I understand.
or you're on a holiday weekend
Well,
or something else like
here's
that.
the very easy way about it. Whenever the ARB denies someone for their application, very simply say, you have 7 days in which to appeal our decision. Now, an approval can also be appealed. So, to protect that, I think 7 days is more
Yes,
than enough.
like
And
I
I
say,
think the ARB should very simply be able to tell people, if they're denied, they have 7 days to file an appeal.
And I was just actually thinking of the point, somebody had made mention about somebody who's savvy come in and appeal. I mean,
They can play the
the
system.
savvy person with a serious appeal is the person that's going to come in within 7
Exactly.
days. It's not going to be somebody who just says, well, I just don't like it. Or vice versa,
That
I
happens.
just don't like it. You're
Yeah,
right.
but
Yeah,
their
absolutely.
dog pees in my bushes, and I don't want their landscape extended.
Okay, I just playing devil's advocate here.
It's an abusive organization.
Again, that was not me.
Moving on.
Yep.
Okay, where are we? Demolition by neglect. We made some revisions.
58,562.
We made some revisions to our ordinance that are not showing up yet for some reason. I need to check with Jen about the building inspector powers. But anyway, the first is B. Now that we have a zoning administrator, basically saying that they'll work through us, through me. And it says if appropriate action is not taken based on the work plan for remediating, then in the ordinance, the zoning administrator has the ability to do legal action, not the building inspector. So that's just a consistency thing. Hazardous building or structures, this is where the building inspector, I need to change the language to call it city's chief code until I borrowed it from the city. But basically saying they can step in if it's a health and safety welfare issue. Which I have been talking to the building inspector about addressing that very issue. Demolition by neglect, that should be taken out. That was inadvertently left in from the city of Bethesda.
I was about to say, I know they shouldn't be allowed to get to that point, but we're in a place with a few that have already gotten to that point, so
Yep.
For an act of nature.
Order of approval. This one, if you wanted to, we always have this chicken before the egg. Does it need to go to the ARB before it goes to the commission? For like site plans and things like that.
They come here first. I think that's been told numerous times.
So B defines that, saying site plan approval. Final action by the review board shall be taken prior to considerations requiring site plan approval.
Wait a minute. Final action by this shall be taken prior to... No. That's backwards.
You want them after or before?
Yeah, I want ARB to get this stuff after us because I don't want there to be any argument or debate over what is technically a zoning requirement as opposed to an ARB guideline issue. And I want these zoning issues handled prior to these plans going to ARB because, quite frankly, it gets mucked up over there.
I would agree.
Yeah, because
The code issues are resolved
Prior to the design
Exactly.
issues.
Yeah.
So that if there is some mucking around with code issues, the applicant can say, approved, meets zoning ordinance. Let's deal with the architectural aspect of it and not deal with things. If you've got a certain setback requirement or a height requirement or a height maximum, and the ARB for aesthetic purposes wants you to change it to something that is beyond the allowances within the code, or they're trying to use the code to justify, or trying to interpret the zoning ordinance to justify some alteration. I want that squared away before it hits ARB, because all it does is cause us trouble.
Yeah, because if it goes to,
Something backwards as well. You and I went back and forth in email about. So.
And why are subdivisions even going to them? Yes, see,
We do have language in the ordinance that talks about
historically, I don't think we've ever sent out a subdivision plat.
yeah, that was part. I guess going back to number 2 or B with the site plan approval, I get pushback both ways. So sheets, for example, sheets like we don't want to run into the situation where we've gone through our site plan approval and some recommendation over the scale, massing, large is going to change the
But Sheets is the
site plan.
perfect example. In order for them to get the signage that they want, they're going to have to get the input and the waivers here first.
You're talking about signage. I'm talking about.
I'm just using that as an example. I'm just using that as an example. They're going to have their construction dimensions, their box within they can build with, shall be handled from a zoning administration standpoint, from a zoning ordinance standpoint here. However ARB makes that fit into that box, that's ARB between ARB and Sheets. But they've got to fit within that box. And they can't shrink, ARB can't shrink the box, and ARB can't expand the box. The box is what the box is. And I want that argument dispensed with before ARB starts mucking around with asking for things that cannot, by their very definition, comport with the zoning ordinance, so that when the applicant comes to us with something that's already been to the ARB and says, ARB is requiring me to do this, we're not in the crappy position of telling them, well, I'm sorry, you can't do that because the zoning ordinance doesn't allow it.
Okay, they come in with a Art Deco, new wave, all glass and steel.
but
48-foot facade.
Silo.
but then
And,
we have
and
to.
we go through the zoning part of it and say, well, that in no way, shape, or form anywhere meets any of the architecture in our town. Go redesign it.
Well, no, because
That's their problem. As long as it
exactly,
fits our
it's two
footprint.
different things. They need to come here first to get the zoning and the ordinance part of this taken care of. Then they go to ARB for the aesthetics. To where, we can give them our stamp and say, yes, this meets our guidelines, and then ARB can go, yeah, no.
And that's fine.
And then they can amend their plans and come back, but as long as they don't change what we have approved, the footprint.
Which they shouldn't.
Exactly.
Well, in some, I'm trying to think of some good examples where.
It also expedites the process.
Well, I'm saying what some people get a little reluctant about, that if a suggestion or some other design compromise comes out of the ARB that materially affects the site plan, they're going to have to come back in for a site plan.
Yep.
Yes.
But the flip side to that is, how long has Sheets been before the ARB?
It's not out yet.
Okay. If they had come here with a site plan, and we had acted upon it, and met all our requirements, got our stamp of approval, and we shipped it off, there's a statutory deadline, so there's not going to be 6 months of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and this color's okay.
It's going to end up being
it's
a
going to
yes or no
expedite the process.
situation.
Yeah. Which puts everybody in a better position. At least.
I just wanted to bring it with other issues, just
My-
bring to your
my-
attention
my
that you run
position
the
hasn't
risk of
changed
the
in
ARB
8
changes it.
PC,
They have to come back here.
ARB.
And this has been
Done.
iterated again and again
Now,
and
is there
again.
anything in here that says they can't?
Well, you've got a provision for them to go in and do, what was it? Preliminary, whatever?
Application, pre-application?
Yes.
Pre-application
anybody-
review? Fine.
Yeah,
they can do it at
anyone
that
can come
stage.
in and carry on that conversation with them, but just to streamline our processes and not keep stuff in committee forever.
I guess, do you even want this section?
Well, if you flip-flop B,
Okay.
get rid of C, I don't know why A is in there.
I plagiarized. I'm thinking that if there's if the BZA,
So yeah, I would just restrict it down to B and flip-flop it, and get rid of everything else.
I guess C with subdivision approval and things like that, we typically track our subdivisions with our site plans. ARB is
Yeah, but it's an
technically,
entirely different thing, and they don't have any review power
Well,
over it.
when they look at these waivers of landscaping and things like that, if you read the ordinance to a T, the ARB is supposed to be looking at all landscape plans for all site plans and all the landscape waivers.
Subdivisions? Sure.
But I guess what I'm saying with subdivisions,
Subdivisions is a ministerial matter.
Yeah.
well, it's like when we did,
Yeah, they got,
when we did Haymarket, Villages of Haymarket, not Villages, Villages of Haymarket? That's next to you, right?
Villages too,
I am
yeah.
in Villages of Haymarket.
Villages 2. That site plan tracked with the site, that subdivision site. I agree striking it out. I guess what I'm saying is when we do some preliminary site subdivisions, they do reference meeting all the zoning code requirements.
To be honest with you, as a ministerial matter that has nothing to do with zoning, is a ministerial and a legal proceeding regarding the ownership and rights, and yeah, I know.
Now, BZA, I'm trying to think of an example of,
Nothing goes to the BZA because nothing from the ARB is technically appealable to the BZA.
no, what this is talking about is if there's,
Final action by the BZA is final action. There will be no action thereafter. Right?
Court.
Yeah.
no, I'm talking about some other situation where,
When's the last time the BZA met?
let me think for a second.
1942.
No, not true.
A fictional example would
I
be,
actually used to sit on the BZA, Jack Capp's administration. We heard one.
No, there was one years ago when I was on council. I don't know what it was about. Sorry.
let's say, the funeral home that never was. Okay. They would have to file a zoning appeal because their lot's so deep, they could not build a building up against the street.
Okay.
Part of that would require an architecture review board. I think what this is saying is that they would have to go to the Board of Appeals to vet that issue, and this is simply saying that BZA would have to make a decision before the ARB could give its final recommendation on the layout and design of that site. So,
Well, if BZA changed whatever was approved or approved whatever was denied, it would still have to go to ARB anyway, so.
Okay.
I was
just
just striking.
playing devil's advocate in here. Now, this brings up a good point. We reference in the site plan ordinance, in the landscaping ordinance, and somewhere else that they require architecture review board. Do you want that? Do you want me to highlight that for you in the next round of revisions and just see whether or not you want to strike it?
Yeah.
Yeah, might as well.
So the one thing that you did mention is, let's go back to sheets. Some terminal months. So it is 60 days to determine things.
14 days. Any only reason I'm bringing up is because we have a lot of.
You're talking about, sorry, planning commission or ARB?
Planning Commission,
Yeah, ARB.
ARB.
60 days from when it shows up on your agenda.
What are your thoughts on that?
Depends on where it's zoned.
They haven't formally submitted yet, have they? Aren't,
They haven't
isn't,
submitted something.
That's right.
yeah, aren't you guys still just in all of your pre-plan? Which reminds me, maybe some type of deadline on the whole pre-planning process?
Yeah, because the
You
last
can,
thing.
you can use X number of meetings of the ARB before you start really chewing up time and expense. I mean, 'cause you're eating up staff time and ARB time.
Well, we're kind
I
of
mean,
seeing
I
that,
can
we're
see
seeing
it
that
both
across the
ways.
board on a lot of things.
Right, and I mean, it's not just the applicant. I mean,
Yeah,
Sheets is trying to do it.
But
They
you-
really want it done.
yeah. Map, one note, we left a couple of parcels out.
Okay.
Okay, I thought we had too much in.
No.
What's that?
No.
When did we,
Carolina.
when did we go all the way up that way?
Where?
That's the
Oh, we
access
did.
quarters.
The
Yeah,
access,
well,
yeah,
I
it
know,
doesn't-
but
it
I
doesn't
thought we
matter.
shrunk those down. We didn't come all the way
No,
across
all it
here.
is, all it is this. All it is that little bitty thing.
And then, oh, it's there. You don't see
I don't
it?
know where that came from. Yeah,
How
that
did
wasn't,
one
correct.
get
I thought we
involved?
stopped it at 66.
We did, actually, before 66
I
quarter.
think
Yeah,
the reason
I
why
thought we
brought it all
stopped
up, we
at-
brought it up to the town boundary, because if we wanted to do some sort of thing in the roadway or something like that.
How's this? That only.
Well, but I'm just want to know why that house got
I
included.
can't remember.
Yeah, I
See,
remember
I don't have a problem bringing
we took it out.
I don't have a problem bringing it to the town boundary. You know, if we want to put up some type of signage, la la la.
Well, I can remember
As,
if that
you
was
know,
a
I just
contributing-
don't.
That may have been a building over 50 years old. I don't know. We can take it out.
Okay.
I would even stop it here. Stop it right at the railroad tracks. Because that's all freaking public land anyway. That's used by the, that's
Is it
owned by
going
the
to stay
utilities.
public land?
It's utility and it's in a floodplain.
Okay, but if we wanted to do any type of signage and get any type of easement, we'd still want to do it there, wouldn't we?
Yeah, but you still just condemn it and do it.
Oh, I can see doing it. I just, I need an
But
explanation
I'd like
for
to
that
stop.
one.
Yeah, I'd like to
I
stop right
can't
there.
remember why I
Okay,
did that.
if you can check. Again, I don't have the problem with it coming to here. It's just, I need to know why that was.
I think I was just
lasted into
following,
it.
these were all lot lines, and I was just following.
And that will screw up with that'll screw around with Robinson's Paradise as well. We did the argument that was
no,
settled.
no.
No, the argument at council was that these lots had to be included. The first front facing lots.
Okay.
So the first lot here, the first lot here, the first lot all the way across Haymarket Station, and then the townhouses here,
Okay. And all those.
so that the Washington Street could be preserved, as I recall. Right? It was one house deed. Was that the compromise?
I don't know.
I think it was one house deed.
Okay. Gotcha.
Oh, you can take mine.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
Uh-oh. What'd I do?
Well, no, but then we get back into the same thing we got going on with the corner lot right now.
Yeah, we
That's- Why not? These are HOAs.
Yeah. But it's a limited circumstance and special circumstance, as opposed to the entirety of the HOA. You're preserving the corridor. And that was
But you're
the
still
sticking,
in
that was the
conflict.
compromise.
But you're still in conflict with the HOA.
Yeah.
Whether it's, the conflict
And?
is less in nature, or in scope.
And?
But it,
These two went together.
No, I'm just saying, that was, this is what council wanted, this was the compromise that was worked out in the meeting. And, yeah, I think everybody understands what the conflict is, but because there are those that are,
okay.
because of a concern about the HOA.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right, yes.
Yeah. No, okay, so I understand why. Now, so, council member, we have, the last thing we want to do is aggravate the conflict that's going on now. We
This
have-
doesn't
this
aggravate it,
predates
this
it.
protects
Predates it as well.
because it hasn't been brought to the council. No, he's not.
Never mind.
I think we're good now.
Okay.
We'll talk offline.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So rural,
Huh? He's there right now.
real fast. Pre-application review, I'm going to limit it to one review. Or how many
One?
reviews?
Well, no, I can see where you can do more than one review. I can even see where in larger things it might take two or three.
I just don't want.
I just don't,
Certainly
you know,
not beyond 3.
18 months is a bit much.
Write some language that says this is not to be abused or to be in lieu of a full application or something. Okay. I need to massage the language in terms of what residence membership means and what other membership is. Strike some powers and duties. Strike some procedures for meetings language. Define public view. I didn't really get an answer on this all this additional language about how to demolish a building if you're denied.
That's
We
not the
reference
state,
it.
that's the state statute now,
Yeah.
correct?
I assume we
We could incorporate it by reference and make the code smaller.
Well, we do that
yeah,
in the
that'd be-
appeal section. So-
Yeah.
I mean, I would just incorporate by reference to the state code.
Okay.
And
And,
rather than adding 2 extra pages of text to the book.
Yeah, it's kind of obnoxious.
And potentially confusing.
I'll look over the exemptions from the Architecture Review Board again. I'll get some more examples if there's anything I can add. Right of appeal, basically 60 days for the commission to make, or the ARB to make a decision. I'll keep the council language, but I'll offer some alternative language that I found. And that should pretty much be it. And then I'm going to pull from other parts of the ordinance, that sections we have by reference to the ARB. And I'm also going to look at the design guidelines and see if there's any conflicts with design guidelines. Okay?
Works for me.
Sorry I'm just taking so long.
Comp plan.
I met with Jennifer, has kind of helped take the lead. They've come up with a work plan. They've started off with tables, and each staff member is starting to work on the tables. I'm going to meet with her this week to, she's going to set up a program that tracks each section and the status of it, and we'll be able to report that to you where we are.
Are there any sections of this you'd like to delegate to anyone else to work on, so we might be able to
You
get
haven't
this?
lost my initial round of corrections, have you?
No. So I think we can do that. I think once we get
Okay.
this kind of table of,
All right.
start check marking it.
Is there any text amendments?
The other ones we have that are tracking with this are definitions. We also have the language from before about annexed lands that never got amended. Because if you haven't,
So
you
you'll
annexed
work all
land-
of this into the historic district
Yep.
checks, presented as a package, works for me.
Correct.
Okay.
We have defining, right now, any use that changes use has to do a site plan. We're going to massage that language.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Brett's getting kicked off, right?
Yeah, an hour and a
Yeah,
half
like-
ago.
Sorry.
7?
What's the score? 12-7?
12-7 who?
Oh.
4 field goals?
No, it was 10, and then they got,
Safety.